and I wanted to get the attention of someone, I would take my most emotion-provoking image that I had ever taken in my whole history of shooting, and I would send an email with that image in the email.
Hey, Lynn, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time. I can't imagine that there's anywhere in the world that doesn't know who Lynn Easton and Easton Events is. But at the risk of not hearing an introduction from you, we'd love you to just to hop in and tell us a short bit on you, like your bio. Tell us who you are. Who's Lynn Easton?
I love giving a short bio on me. So thank you. Nice to be with you both. So I am Lynn Easton, and I have been planning weddings for almost 30 years in an era where I remember when I first started in Charlottesville, Virginia. And I remember somebody asked me do you know of a planner that we could use? And I said, I don't think there are any planners here, but I used to be a producer at ABC of an hour-long television show. I'm sure I can figure out how to plan your wedding. And I offered it to her as a gift. And now I think there are like 250 wedding planners in Charlottesville, Virginia. So the world has changed. So I would say those of us who have been in the business for 30 years were really in it at the beginning. And we have seen an Olympic amount of change happen.
Yes.
So I've enjoyed a very fun career in wedding planning. But equally fun is that I married a fabulous man who has a love of hospitality as well. And we've built another company called Easton Porter Group. And we own a winery that does weddings in Charlottesville. And then we own a little boutique hotel called Zero George in Charleston, another restaurant in Charleston called Wild Common, another event venue in Charleston called Cannon Green. And last night we opened Costa, which is our new Italian coastal cuisine restaurant. And that was really big. So we're really busy. We wear a lot of hats. I most famously have 11 grandchildren.
Nice.
So my life is fun and rich, and we diverse, and we travel an insane amount, probably more than I'd like to. But so that's me. There you go.
I love it. I'm Lynn Easton. I'm building an empire. Like, that's great.
There's 250 planners in Charlottesville. It's your fault.
True. Well,
that's probably on you. Yeah.
Yeah. And just kind of jumping into, you have amazing clients as you've described. And as we know, I just wanted to start by asking, like, what's your approach to understanding your client's vision, their story, and how to execute on that vision? Or is it really like a big part is your vision as well? What does that look like?
Well, it is interesting that I like to say that if anyone was looking, if they walked into a wedding, I would never want them to say, oh my God, that's an Easton wedding. From a design point of view. But when you look at our website and you see all of our weddings, there is definitely a synergy. There's definitely a thread. When you look at all of our weddings, you're like, oh, these are all Easton weddings. And I think what makes an Easton wedding, a couple things. One is we have I think a very residential look. We want everything to feel very comfortable. So we design as if we were designing, as if we were an interior designer. I do love negative space so that things can look, you all were mentioning this wedding that just dropped on Over the Moon. And one of the things that makes it look lovely is that it has a lot of negative space in it. So I think that's important. We also really always, designed to the place. So, and I always say to people, and I say it on an interview every time when we interview a client, they're interviewing us, we're interviewing them, to be frank. We only do 8 weddings a year. So we're not looking for we say we're not looking for every bride, we're just looking for the Easton bride or the Easton couple. And so we're looking for families and couples that share our aesthetic. So
I guess to answer your question, long story long, there we already have some predefined guidelines in terms of design.
And then the next part is that it ultimately is, the couples are coming to us saying, gosh, we want it, I want it to feel we're at the seaside, and I love blue, and I love this floral, and I love brightness, or I love it to be quiet, and then we're taking design direction from the client, and then ultimately we're storyboarding it, and then we're bringing in an actual designer. We're lucky enough to work with, some of the best, that whether that's Mindy Rice or HMR or David Beam or all the top companies, and they're ultimately helping us finish off the design. So I think, does that answer your question?
No, for sure. Yeah. I hear you saying it's a collaboration. It
Yes,
starts with the
most
client's
definitely.
vision, but it is a collaboration across something we love to certainly highlight, because we realize like we're only as good as the partners that we work with.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
I mean, that is so true. I mean, when the first wedding that I ever did, this wedding that I was saying, 30 years ago, one of the great things that happened was that the budget was very, very generous. So I was able to hire vendors that would protect me from myself. So I really believe, and I think this is so important for all of us, no matter what industry you're in, do your best to hire the very best partners and then get out of their way and let them do what you hired them to do.
Yeah.
And so we very much feel that we are the executive producers. People always say, are you a designer? Are you a planner? And I basically say, I'm the executive producer of this show. I ultimately am going to have, the ability to choose or fire the costume designer, the set designer, the prop master, all of the things, but I'm going to hire the very best and have them bring their A game. And I do think it's interesting that there are a lot of planners who don't do it that way. They hire really good talent, but then they keep getting in their way and not letting them do what they do. And I think that's true with photographers and videographers. I would like to think that we give our photographers and videographers a ton of leeway. I mean, because I only know what I know. You all know what you know. Hire the best and get to the side. There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. I for
philosophy.
one, we definitely feel that way. Like when we've worked with you, that's been our experiences. Like we have all that leeway. I mean, we straighten up when we were working the Easton Events. Otto says it all the time.
I was going to say that because you level up, you straighten up, you set the standard, Lynn, you set the tone, and we play, but we straighten up.
Well, I must say, for all of your team listening, one of the things that is the nicest about working with you all is how quietly, and I'm not saying you aren't feeling anxious underneath, but how quietly and calmly and like there's a sense of joy when you're moving through the space. And I think that is so important that, and if you're faking it, it's, at times, which I'm sure we all are, it's still the right way. So there's this sense of calm. And I remember, James, we were in Colorado, and I looked up and I don't know, I think like we were trying to decide whether to pull the ceremony inside or not. And you just looked at me and smiled across the room. And I was like, okay, I guess this is going to be okay. Cause he's got it. So it's something that everybody should, I think photographers and videographers really need to understand how important their reaction to what's going on is, that you are really on game day, you are the most important partner to that planner. And hopefully they treat you that way. And the way you feel and the way you react is gonna rub off on the planner. So one needs, and I've worked with some high-strung planners at times, high-strung photographers at times, and you probably stop working with them if they're high-strung a lot. So
it's
interesting. I've never thought of it that way.
Lynn, we're talking a lot about luxury weddings and premium, and we've heard you talk about ultra luxury. So we're curious, why ultra luxury, and how do you define that? Tell us more about that.
It's a really great question, and I've done a whole course on it. So I have a lot to say about it. I would say the things that make an ultra luxury wedding, probably most importantly, is the guest experience. that it's not to say that no money is spared, but guest experience is absolutely, whether it's, if you're at a luxury wedding and you have 200 people, you're going to put on this many buses because maybe those buses will come around again. In an ultra luxury wedding, there are 200 people. There are exactly the correct amount of seats in the sitting outside.
That's it.
And everybody gets on a vehicle. There's a transportation manager on every single vehicle greeting you, telling you what's going to happen, how long you're going to be there, who's already done a dry run so your bus isn't going to get missing. So that is the difference, just from a transportation point of view, the difference between luxury and ultra luxury. And if you think about how important, I think that transportation is one of the most critical pieces of a wedding, because you get on, if you have to wait, if you're in Lake Como and you have to wait 30 minutes for that vehicle to circle back, it doesn't make a good start to the event. So those kind of things, it's also things like guest experiences as it comes to like entertainment, the amount of layers, whether it's obviously sort of the ultimate ultra luxury thing is a headliner, which we do at ultra luxury. But even if it's not a headliner, it's a variety of, it'll be 7 different steps of music that layer up as the evening go on. That, there's never just a DJ. There's always the final after party is a hybrid DJ, which has got 6 different things. And then there's a break and a boy band comes in. So you're spending, an enormous amount of money on entertainment, even after the wedding is all gone and you only have 100 people left. It's things like having a room perfectly heated, perfectly cooled, having everyone have access to a beautiful cashmere pashmina, not the $10 one, but the $150 one that nobody's counting and figuring out where they're going to go afterwards. There are activation stations for food or entertainment. There are caviar bumps. There are just all of these little things. It's sort of obvious that partly what it comes down to is that you're in an ultra luxury wedding. You can spend, you're probably spending over $500,000 on just the decor. So that sort of kind of goes without saying. It's the size of the band, the fascia and the band backdrop, and everything is custom. Every carpet is custom. Every color is custom. Everything is custom. So that kind of is obvious, I think, about what's the difference between luxury and ultra luxury, because you can have a beautiful event and you can do everything in non-custom. So I think the first thing you could say is an ultra luxury, absolutely everything is custom except for maybe the base of the chair, which we probably have recovered. So that's obvious, but it's the layers of luxury. It's like going to, a beautiful hotel. It's the way someone greets you. It's that personalization. It's the, you walk in, we have a Facebook on every VIP. So every bartender knows who that father of the bride. I'm not saying they don't miss it, but they've got a piece of paper that they can look at and they can refresh. Okay, what does the father of the bride looks like? What does the mother of the bride? Because they may not have any identifiers on. So it's those are the things. It's communication. It's having every single person. When we go out and do an ultra luxury wedding, we'll have 50 people on walkie-talkie. Like there is nothing. There is a glass that goes down. There is like glass down now stat. I got people walking out within 30 seconds of that glass going down to get that glass up. That's ultra luxury. So that's it. It's and the stakes are really high. They're much, much higher. There is no room. There's no room for error. And Dawson and I were talking, my number 2, we're talking about this before. And she said, one of the things that, and I would say this about myself, and I probably drive everybody crazy, that I am kind of famous for is that I sit around and think about all the things that could go wrong and what we're going to do if they do go wrong, so that there is a well thought out plan for, all right, what do we do if we lose a shuttle? What do we do if the officiant doesn't show? What do we do if the groom is whatever it is? So there are, and I think also that anticipatory thinking is totally is also critical to being in the ultra luxury world, because stuff will happen, things will go down, and people unexpected will arrive, and you've got to, you have to be prepared for it. So I do think that being a really thinking through an event and all that can go wrong is a really important part of really being in the luxury world, and having your client pay for the things that can go wrong too, like the backup plan, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. We just had a conversation with Peyton Frank, and we were all saying, because we were all talking about how Lynn Easton makes us all straighten up, and what she said was like Lynn notices everything, and we're not even talking about the stuff that's in the background that you're talking about. We're saying like in the room, when you walk in the room, you can just tell you see it. You see what you have it in your head, and it's noticeable for sure.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I'd like to think I have a really good eye, but I tell you, I remember being someplace we were at a club in New York, and it's about to be showtime, and I look over at a bar that I've been walking by, and there's a rack of glasses there, and I'm like, how is that rack of glasses still there? So, but it is part of every, and just back to ultra luxury, every trash can is perfectly wrapped. Every, we have rules, what can go on the top of the bar, what can't, what everybody's wearing, what the band is wearing. I mean, we have, once upon a time, I have the luxury of not having to ask anymore. But, in the old days, I remember my first time a videographer came and he was wearing jeans, and I was like, what? And I had to send him home to get changed. So it's just, I think being able to think about all of those things is creating the full luxury package. All of your team members in outfits that are themed to the actual event. These are all cues for people that say ultra luxury.
Yeah. I think for me, ultra luxury, when I listen to you like that, I think of the first time we visited an Amman property, which completely ruined us for everything else. Because if you walk into, let's say a Four Seasons, it's amazing. The pillows are nice. The bathroom is nice. But with the Amman, there's another level of curation, right? You look in the bathroom, like you said, every facet, it makes sense. It adds up. There's nothing is left to chance. Not a thing. Yeah.
Right. And the way people connect to you, and if you think about being in a beautiful Mexican hotel and they're putting their hand on their heart, to me that is ultra luxury, right? Training every single person to do this, and it's huge. I was at St. Bart's this weekend at Cheval Blanc, which is such a beautiful hotel. And all the women who work there are in these absolutely adorable outfits. Some of them, but they've just been so curated. And as you walk past, they actually don't put their hand, but they kind of somehow there's some movement that makes you feel sort of tender. And then they turn. They don't keep walking past you. They stop and they turn and they let you pass. And it's that's really ultra luxury, right?
Yeah.
And it costs nothing really, right?
Mm-hmm. No, but that's the difference. And that little hard thing that you just described at the Palmilla that they do, that hasn't left me since they started doing it. I do it to people in Mexico myself because I'm like,
so lovely.
So beautiful.
I love it so much. And and I always do it back, and they smile and we smile, and now we're connecting as humans, and this is the feel good, and that's why you take vacations. Right?
That's it.
That's amazing. So I know there's a lot of planners listening to this. I wanted to ask you, what are the characteristics, what are the qualities that you think make a wedding planner great? Because there's a lot of good planners, right? We say this about photography also. There's good photographers. What's the thing that makes a planner great, in your opinion?
Well, to circle back, I do think one of the really a fabulous planner, I think, has the ability to think ahead and really think through the thread. And I always say when I'm doing a site visit, I'm literally and we're going here and we're walking. And I walk through it. How does the guest experience it? So I want to know how is this going to make the guest feel? So one of the things that a great planner does is really drills down to not just how pretty it is going to be, because that's sort of obvious that it's going to be pretty, but how the guest is going to experience it, I think is so important. And it's all those things that we just talked about from ultra luxury and where am I going to be waiting? And is there going to be an overhang, or are we going to have enough umbrellas, or all of those things? So being that anticipatory thinker, I think, is sort of probably the first layer. And literally I think the second thing is being an insane and ruthless list maker. I mean, we work in base camp, and we're assigning things to everybody. And I go into this thing and I'm like checking things off. And so I think the ability to keep, we're, part of what we've done in our course that we've done is shared with everybody all of the lists that we have, all of these high touch lists. So we actually have a list that's called a high touch list. So we go through. And because I've got young planners who are starting, and how are they going to know, let's say they've only worked in the luxury market, that they need to ask the question to the caterer, what size trash can are you using? And they should say a Slim Jim. And do you have covers? And what color are they? And how old are they? So those are 4 questions that if you come from the luxury market, you're not going to know to ask. So we've got just layers and layers and layers of questions. And I think that's important. I think obviously you have to be, I think every great planner could have made a lot of people happy as a therapist. I really do believe the great planners understand how to be mediators, negotiators, consolers, facilitators. I mean, they know how to push. There are so many things that a great planner has to be able to do, from an emotional component to diffuse things, to help them understand what really is worth worrying about and what isn't. And I'm sometimes really honest, and I'll say to a mother, these are simple problems. They're going to have other problems the rest of their life. These are simple problems, and you need to help explain to them that this is a caviar, it's just a champagne problem. So
yes, perspective.
Exactly. And then I think, obviously you have to be a great designer, as I said. That's sort of obvious. And then again, just back to this sort of, I think I guess I probably think about great planners more about organization. And it's funny because, Martha Bloom is, certainly one of my dearest friends. And she is so wildly and wonderfully creative that she'd laugh at me. She laughs at me. She's like, yeah, Lynn's all crazy about her logistics, because that's, for me, my comfort zone. That's how I move through an event, that we have nailed the logistics. So that's what's really important to me. And I think if you have a type A personality, lean into it, listen to it, move forward through it. And so I guess all that I've said, I think, is really important. But then I'll say about somebody like Marcy, somebody who knows how to bring complete surprise and delight is also an incomparable planner. And there aren't many planners who can do that.
I can see
and
that.
There aren't many designers that can do that. There really aren't, because that sense of delight is something that we're all looking for. So I guess the thing is, if that's not your strong suit, then you logistically crush it. So I think that's pick one.
Okay, so let me ask you this, Lynn. With all of that said, then for your creative partners, for photographers or videographers specifically, what do you look for in a good collaborator from your perspective? I mean, throughout, from beginning to end.
And so let's take off we're going to take off obviously the quality of the pictures, because that's it's just like being a great planner. We're taking off the fact that you have to deliver the goods, and they've got to be great. So I think the first thing is that I probably have more things that I don't want them to do. What do I not want to
give it to us?
I will never work again with anyone who ever again. And for me, it's one strike and you're out. And that's not very usual for me. But if you're at an event and you're needy, that'll be the last time you're going to work with Easton, because there's so much need coming from the clients. I have absolutely no accommodation for at the event for someone coming up and telling me anything that they need. I mean, and we're and I don't know whether I've said this to you before, but I will never forget. I had somebody we had a vegan meal. You know, we always ask all of our, you know, like, we're kind. We love you guys. We believe that you are what's going to make us look great. So we are 100% in your corner, trying to take care of you, trying to be sure that you've got some place to rest, good things to eat, all of the stuff. And I had somebody who was vegan, and I had 2 vegan meals for my vendors, and I had a small vendor group, and that they went in and that vegan meal was gone. And in the middle of this, even in the middle of this wild event, which was so hard, they came up to me and said, I didn't have a vegan meal. And I just cannot tell you why.
You almost went uneasy.
And obviously I'm sorry that they didn't have a vegan meal, but like, that's what sports bars are for. I mean, that's what, it's just not appropriate in the middle of this. You can post more afterwards. You can say, just so you know, Lynn, I wasn't able to eat. I don't know whether next time maybe you could order more meals. I just wanted to get it on your radar, that whatever, but not in the middle. So being needy in any shape or form with an elite planner is going to get you not hired again.
Tell us how you really feel.
Yeah, exactly. I feel really strongly
I
about
love it. It's important.
I think conversely, being super, like, as I already said to both of you, you approach everything so chill. And we literally finish the event and go like, God, it was such a pleasure. Part of the job as wanting to get hired again and again is being a real team player with your planner. Yeah. And when stuff goes wrong, which it inevitably will, you know that she or he, the planner, is bobbing and weaving. And our expectation is you got to bob and weave with us. And if anybody ever said to me, but that's not on the timeline, I'd probably never work with them again. Because we all know the timelines are just there to help guide us, and that, the grandmother decides to speak. I think you were there, in the middle of a party that she wasn't supposed to. That's you just got to be ready to bob and weave, and there's really nothing we can do about that. We can't stop them from. So, I think other things would be, and this is a funny little pet peeve. I would recommend not sending anything like people send me things. They send me candles, and I'm like, if I want candles, I'm going to go out and buy my own scented candles. I do not believe you should send unsolicited gifts to any planner to get their attention. It just doesn't work. Yeah, and it's wasteful, and it doesn't get on anybody's radar. I do think that being persistent is really important, though. I mean, and it being, and I must say, it's a little bit, if I can be so frank, as to why we work together. I mean, we territorially we didn't have any crossover. We didn't, at that point when we were working together, it wasn't like, we had any vendor crossover ever. So I've got 2 wonderful photographers reaching out to me saying, so how did that collaboration that we came to? It was really your steady, quiet, what's the right word? It so wasn't thirsty, though. I mean, it was a little annoying because, but that's how there's no other way to do it. You've got to land in somebody's inbox. And when you're on your 6th email, and I sort of hate to say this because you really, I guess the part of the point is you have to have the goods. Like, I'm trying to be clear on this. Like, you can't be a junior photographer and try to climb into the inbox of Marcy Bloom and think it's going to do you any good, because it won't. Yeah. So part of this is, even when you're established, though, and you're just trying to broaden who you work with. And I've got a major designer who I'm working with now. And honestly, it's just, he, reached out to me, and I admire your work and I'd love to work with you, which is such a great way to, obviously the funniest thing when people say to me, I just stumbled across your work. And I'm like, oh my God, that is the biggest insult.
Yeah.
Please don't say that. I just stumbled upon your work.
Yeah.
So no gifts. For the videographers out there, I feel very strongly that those, there was a little bit of a period where we were getting little video books that, were one-time use. I think that is a tragedy. Do not do it. It is a waste of money. And it is so bad for the planet. It is a sign to me that you don't care about the planet. So I really don't think, and no photographer, and I'm sure some of the people who send me them are listening, should ever send one of those big paper books of images, like they're, I don't know if you've seen them ever, but they're, they're, I don't know how much they must cost to make. I don't know how many trees have died to do it, but there's, in the ultra luxury world, I don't see my clients. Like, I don't physically see my clients. So I do it all by Zoom. And the first time I see them is when I go on a site visit. And it's certainly not going to take the book with me. And they have certainly already picked their photographer. So all that book, unless it's going into like somebody's, where you go in and you shop around and you look at lots of different photographers, like I don't know, like, how Claudia Henley used to have that library, that kind of a thing, that might work. But so I just think pulling back on all of the stuff is important. And yet the approach, if I were a seasoned photographer and I wanted to get the attention of someone, I would take my most emotion-provoking image that I had ever taken in my whole history of shooting, and I would send an email with that image in the email. And
listen, y'all.
I tell you, that's what stops me. And I see that picture, and you've made it easy for me to push the button underneath, and up comes a website with an equally fabulous.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, this is also good. If you are a photographer and all you've shot is like rock stars in Santa Barbara or Los Angeles or whatever, there's probably almost no chance I'm going to see what I need in your work, because you're, and I hate to say it, that's just the truth. So don't, if you're not shooting, and then you're going to say, how do you get your first ultra luxury job? Because as I think if you've never shot an ultra luxury wedding, it's going to be very hard to get the attention of an ultra luxury. So and at some point you've got to get that hit. I mean, and that'll happen. And that happens because you're liaising with other people, and somebody will, somebody's brother who's marrying the sister is now taking you to Saint-Tropez. That hit will come, and then you'll have that collateral. But what I'm trying to say is that the image that you're sending has to speak to the planner.
Yeah.
Like if you send me an image of a dark, moody, I'm just going to be honest, completely head to toe tattooed woman, it's not going to speak to me. So you've got to share. You got to share images that speak to my language, my love language, what I do. But I think just including the only no one what is going to so you can't imagine how many times a week, I don't know, we get bombed by photographers. Like it's so what's gonna make me hit the button? Only thing that's ever going to make me hit the button is having an image to see. So
that's immense. That's immense. Because I think photographers, Lynn, to your point about the tattooed portrait photographers, it's all about photography. So they see the image and they go, this is an award-winning image. It's unbelievable. The composition, the light. And we say to them, but does your client, whether that's a planner or the actual client, is that what they want to see? Because if it's not, that's not going to bite. That's not the hook. You know what I mean? So that's immense.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
I personally am guilty of what you're saying. When we worked with you in France, I took the client out for like a little engagement session, right? And there was lots of beautiful like Easton type of images, but I remember there's this one pocket of light, direct light, shadow, and I made this like really moody image. And I still remember you commenting, we were already hired by you. And I remember you looking at that image and going, yeah, that's not an Easton image. And you were kind, but I guess I'm just being vulnerable here to the people that are listening to, like, it's fine. You're going to make mistakes. Like, you just have to correct.
Yeah. Right. And it's not to say it wasn't a beautiful image. It's just that I think we're all saying the exact same thing. It can be an absolutely exquisite image and perfect in its composition. But if it doesn't speak to the planner, and then that doesn't work. So
even on the job you already got. That's important.
And to James,
right? That's important.
And to James, it's created as a professional. He only cried later in the room. In that moment, he didn't cry at all. Just later, like a man, like a real man, in private.
Exactly right. Later. That was a pretty wedding. You had some great shots. It was amazing. The other pet peeves I have are your job as a photographer is that you must not only read the timeline, but you have to have whatever shortcuts you need. And I've been seeing some fun ones. Chris Jesperson, as a videographer, pulled out this little card the other day with all the hits on it. I was like, that is really clever. But your job is to know where you're supposed to be and know it well. And your job is to read the timeline very well before the event. We send those timelines out a month before, and we don't do it for our pleasure. We do it because we want our videographers and our photographers to tell us, have we set you up for success? Yeah. And if you read the timeline and you haven't decided that you're set up for success, you will never work for Easton again if you're there and say, but I don't have enough time. But I gave you a timeline. You told me you had enough time, and now you're telling me you don't have enough time. So that's really not fair. And the other thing is, I really just popped into my head, and this is such if you make a mistake, I really recommend that to an elite planner, you cannot sweep it under the rug.
Yeah.
And we all make mistakes. I live in a world where I'm just hopeful we can make as few. My goal is to make as few as possible. We go out on our jobs with 12 people, 12 humans, all capable of making 100 mistakes during the day. We try to get that down to as small as number. And the same is true for our vendors. We are all going to make mistakes. And sometimes the shit hits the fan. But if you don't acknowledge the fact that something went wrong, then when I get those pictures back, and let's say the color's wonky, or like you just didn't get the fireworks shot, or somehow that kiss just didn't make it in, you have to say to the planner, I love this wedding. I hope you love the images, but to be perfectly frank, I don't think I caught the image of the fireworks, because I want to know that you missed it, and that's how we form a relationship. That's how we go forward. And I can say, how did you miss it? And then we can have that conversation. But that's so important to building trust between each other. And so, and I think there are lots of people who are like, oh, well, if I just don't mention it, maybe she won't notice.
She will notice.
I'm saying she's literally walking around with this string, everybody. She's not going to miss it. She has a string in her hand. Come on now. Not getting away with anything here.
I did notice the other day. It's like that. See, that does drive me crazy. And we try to provide, and this is again ultra luxury versus luxury. We try in an ultra luxury setting to provide someone who is going along with the photographers most of the time and helping them with their needs, so that when they go to shoot the tablescape, that the napkin is perfect, that the fork is perfect. I mean, I do actually think it's my photographer's job to do that. Don't take a picture. Do not take a picture of a long table from the end if the tablecloth isn't absolutely perfect. And if you as a photographer don't know how to make it perfect, then you go find a planner or you find a server who's going to help you make it perfect, because your job is to be
notice.
Sure that you take pictures that are aligned and perfect, because it'll scream at you. And I think the problem is, like, you all are working so fast and everything else, but it is something that you absolutely have to develop your eye for, is that eye for perfection. Stop, look, see what you're getting, being sure it's right. Because if I have all these reasons I'll never work with people again, and I'm really not that mean. But again, if I got sloppy pictures back, that would be would be, unless you came and said to me, "Listen, Lynn, I'm so sorry. I realized when I shot this, I was moving too fast. As you know, the light was falling. No excuses, but the light was falling. I was shooting as fast as I could, and I didn't honestly notice that the place setting that I had, the forks were askew. And at that point, I can say, you know what? We're sorry that we didn't tell you which one was perfect, because I will have some ownership on that. I mean, I believe that we owe you a perfectly set tablescape to shoot. So I think that's really important. So reading the timelines, being an absolutely crazy detailed person when you're taking pictures, I think is really important. And then I think my last 2 points are that, never send your images to the client before you send it to the elite planner. And I hope everybody out there knows that. But that's a pretty big mistake for anybody to make. And the reason for that is that every elite planner feels that we are the client, not the client.
Yeah.
Like, we are the decision makers. We are the ones who are going to hire you again. That client is only there probably one time. So if you want to work again and again with an elite planner, you 100,000% need to treat them as if they are the client and no one else. And I think that's a little hard. And sometimes even, you may even and it's a little gray area. If somebody's hired the photographer first, that area gets a little bit more gray. But I still, in my world, at my level, let's say it's you, everybody, like if it's somebody like nobody's ever heard of, then I think that's sort of even more intriguing. But if it's somebody that I've already worked with, we have a relationship, and they shot my brother's wedding, I still would expect you to feel, I would still expect to be the client, feel like the client. So,
that's such good advice. No, that's such good advice. And I would argue like that you should probably, regardless of the level of the planner that you're working with. I mean, you mentioned elite planner, but I think that's great advice for every level. Because we always say, hey, we have two clients, the planner and the couple and their families. Those are the people we're serving, and we're serving that family on behalf of you. You're the host. Yes. So it's great advice.
Right. Yeah.
I love this. It's so helpful. Yeah. Gosh.
We've taken an awful lot of your time, Lynn. Before we let you go, you have something for the community, for the industry that you wanted to talk about.
I do. So I am, we are going to drop a course in the summertime for photographers and videographers, but it's going to be totally, obviously, from the planner's point of view. All the things that we think are important to do and not to do. And my list is so long. And I think it's a really, as far as I've seen, I don't think anybody has really spoken to this particular, from a planner's point of view, particularly from an elite planner's point of view, have really tackled the ins and outs of how to make this relationship work as well as it can be, how to be that partner to a planner, how to be able to be hired again and again, how to do things that, when to lean in on pricing. Where is the right price? I mean, even all of those things, what we expect and what we think our deliverables are. So it's going to be a course for a photographer and a videographer to see through the lens of an ultra luxury planner, how to make that how to sell, how to pitch, and how to make the relationship work. So that drops this summer. So that'll be fun.
Oh,
invaluable.
That's going to be incredible. Invaluable.
Awesome.